When it comes to evangelical Christianity, there was a major rise in young earth creationism in the mid 20th century, especially around the 1960s with the publication of Genesis Flood by John Whitcomb and Henry Morris. Surprisingly, before this uprising, most evangelical and Baptist Christians held to views like theistic evolution or progressive creation. Young earth creationism today wants to present itself as not only the most faithful interpretation of Genesis, but also as scientifically accurate. Scientifically accurate enough to withstand critique from the broader scientific community. So the question is, does it actually do that? Does young earth creationism really make sense of things like the geological column, the immensity of the universe, or the progression of life? I'm here to tell you no. Now, to be clear, I'm not arguing that young earth creationism is an unfaithful reading of Genesis. It can be. That's not the issue. The issue is that it fails scientifically. Not only that, it creates unnecessary theological problems, and it also often relies on weak or fallacious reasoning. One of the biggest assumptions in this conversation is that young earth creationism is the historic Christian position. This is not necessarily the case. As said earlier, Ronald Numbers notes in his book, The Creationists From Scientific Creationism to Intelligent Design, that most Christians, quote, readily conceded that the Bible allowed for an ancient earth and pre-Edenic life. Modern young earth creationism was really systematized with the Genesis flood in 1961, as stated earlier. Before that, though, a wide range of views existed, even among the most conservative Christians. And if you go further back to the Church Fathers, you don't see the type of interpretive rigidity that modern young earth creationists insist on. Take St. Augustine of Hippo, a church father who wrote extensively about Genesis. He says, quote, in matters that are obscure and far beyond our vision, even in such as we may find treated in Holy Scripture, different interpretations are sometimes possible without prejudice to the faith we have received. In such a case, we should not rush in headlong and so firmly take our stand on one side that, if further progress in the search of truth justly undermines this position, we too fall with it. Augustine argues here that if a passage is unclear, don't lock yourself into one reading so strongly that you collapse when it's challenged. That's exactly the problem we're seeing now with young earth creationism. Scientific critique number 1. The starlight problem. Let's start with something simple. Distance in space. We measure distance in light years, the distance light travels in 1 year, and we observe objects millions and billions of light years away. So the implication is straightforward. The light took millions and billions of years to reach us. This is direct conflict. As Kenneth D. Keithley points out in his article, The Confessions of a Disappointed Young Earther, quote, this presents a serious problem for the young earth creationists, who claim not only the earth, but the entire universe was created in 6 days, roughly 6,000 years ago. The difficulty here is huge. As Nieminen argues in Theological Implications of Young Earth Creationism and Intelligent Design, quote, this is the ultimate reason why the creationist case is so fragile from the scientific point of view. Young earth creationist doctrine can be falsified by a single piece of knowledge, as YEC doctrine states that one error is enough to demolish the theory and the literal interpretation of Genesis. End quote. Now, there have been attempts to solve this. Initially, some suggested alternative physics, like light traveling through another dimension. But those ideas collapsed math and science almost instantly. Because of this, young earth creationists largely abandoned this view and instead emphasized the concept of the appearance of age, also known as the mature creation or the omphalos argument. This idea comes at a cost, though, which will be explained in depth later. On to the next issue, geology. Early young Earth creationist models attempted to explain the geological column through a single catastrophic event, the global flood described in the book of Genesis. The basic claim was straightforward. Rock layers in the fossil record were formed rapidly during this flood. To support this, some pointed to alleged evidence such as the human and dinosaur footprints discovered along the Paluxy River, which were claimed to demonstrate that humans and dinosaurs had once coexisted. However, this line of evidence did not withstand scrutiny. Detailed analysis revealed that the supposed human footprints were not genuine trace fossils, but later carvings. Bernie Newfield, a Seventh-day Adventist geologist, says this about the Paluxy River fossils. Quote, they also have a single track of inferior quality, that is, in the limestone of a different color and texture from that of the other prints. One of the three-toed dinosaur tracks in both types of the man prints have been cross-sectioned. In each instance, the rock layers end abruptly at the edge of the track, indicating that they are not the result of foot stepping in a soft mud, but are produced by carving. End quote. This creates a significant problem for the original young Earth creationist geological argument. If such key evidence is unreliable, the explanatory framework must be revised. In response, the position shifted. Figures such as Andrew Snelling proposed alternative models, including ecological zonation theory, which suggests that the ordering of the fossils reflects pre-flood ecological distribution rather than a chronological sequence. However, this revised model introduces further difficulties. The main problem is with the global flood proposition. For example, uranium-238's half-life is about 4 billion years. We have observed and found uranium-238 billions of years into its half-life. Even Snelling admits that most of the young Earth creationist geology cannot be explained scientifically. He concedes, quote, coal beds were formed during the flood year, approximately 4,500 years ago, as were many of the granites that contained uranium and polonium radiohollows, because the granites intruded into flood-deposited strata. Thus, it is concluded that hundreds of millions of years worth of radioisotope decay must have occurred during the flood year, only about 4,500 years ago. There is no scientific model that explains how this could happen, only the appeal to the miraculous. It again is the appearance of age argument. The implication is substantial. Geological processes must operate at rates and under conditions that are not observed in the present and are difficult to reconcile with established physical constraints. At this stage, the issue is no longer merely interpretive, but methodological. This is where the issue gets much deeper. The appearance of age argument creates serious theological tension. If light shows events that never actually happened, radioactive decay points time that never occurred, then the natural world is presenting a false history. So the question is, can we actually trust creation? Because traditionally, Christianity affirms that creation reveals truths about God. But if everything looks old and isn't, then creation becomes, at best, misleading. That's a serious problem for natural theology. When you follow the trajectory of these arguments, they tend to end in one place: fideism. When the evidence doesn't align, the response becomes, it's a miracle, accept it. Now again, Christians believe in miracles. But if your entire framework depends on rejecting observable evidence whenever it conflicts with your interpretation, then the claim is no longer scientific. It becomes a leap of faith rather than reason. And that's the tension. Young Earth creationism wants to be seen as scientifically valid, but it ultimately relies on non-scientific explanations to survive. So let's bring this together. Young Earth creationism is not the historic default, does not align with the current scientific evidence, and creates theological complications. And the biggest issue is that proponents such as Kem Ham elevate a secondary issue into a defining marker of the Christian faith, when in reality, all of the historic churches, including Catholic, Reformed, Lutheran, many others, have allowed for disagreement here. So instead of strengthening Christianity, this approach often creates unnecessary conflict and sometimes drives people away entirely. Recognizing that the universe is ancient does not weaken belief in God. If anything, it allows for a view of creation that is both intellectually honest and theologically coherent. And that is a much more stable foundation than what young Earth creationism is currently offering.